bana söz verdiğiniz için. Bugün öz doktorantura işimin bir bölümünü gurur verecek. Şimdi Amerika'da doktorantura edenden sonra birazcık kıyın oluyor. Mesela Türkmençe literatüra belli de şu an için benim kavak İngilizce gururlar, kavak Türkmençe gururlarını bağışlarsınız. Bu doktorantura işimin bir naması mergers and acquisitions ve joint venture'ların performance. Let me speak in English. It's just too hard. So I did research on the effects of mergers and acquisitions and joint ventures on the firm's performance and idiosyncratic risk. There's an outline. Of course, I'm not going to go through the entire presentation because I'm pressed with the time. We have very limited time. I'll try to capture the big picture for you as much as possible. So the whole finance, you can break it in as corporate finance, as investment, banking, so on and so forth. My research lays within something we call corporate finance. And the corporate strategic investments, which mergers and acquisitions and joint ventures being part of the corporate strategic investments, are taken to maximize the firm value. If not, then we question things. And the other part is they are taken to achieve a sustainable advantage over competitors. So examples of strategic investment decisions can be listed as mergers and acquisitions, joint ventures, divestitures, common stock repurchases. Okay? And this work focuses on mergers, acquisitions, and joint ventures. The general problem. The general problem of the corporate finance, so speaking. It goes back to the separation of ownership and control. For example, let's say you own 10,000 shares of Google. Okay? Each share of Google worth about $600 now. 600 times 10,000 is pretty big money. But are you important enough to affect the decision of Google? I don't think so. Even if you are a relatively rich man, you cannot affect the decisions that Google can take, or any other publicly traded company. So here comes the separation of ownership and control. Yes, theoretically you are the owner of a company because you are holding so on and so forth shares of a company, but are you controlling it? No. Then question arises because corporations can take some strategic decisions which you have no influence on the control. Then corporate finance comes in and starts studying these issues. How companies fare after certain strategic, certain decisions, so on and so forth. The literature have studied the performance of mergers and acquisitions and joint ventures. So but they haven't been able to produce any unified theoretical explanations why mergers and acquisitions or joint ventures happen. It's all empirical work. Results are mixed. Some scholars found that they perform well, and some found they don't perform well. But there was, of course, when you do a Ph.D. or scientific work, you have to find a niche area where relatively less work is done. So the niche area that I found in this work is idiosyncratic risk following these mergers and acquisitions and joint ventures. And the niche is the firms. Yes, we don't have a unified theoretical explanation why it happens, but here how I connect the dots, so speaking. They reduce their idiosyncratic risk following mergers and acquisitions and joint ventures. I found that all the firms, statistically and economically significantly, they reduce their idiosyncratic risk. So just put this aside.
Can
Yes.
you explain, somebody maybe doesn't know what means
Yeah.
idiosyncratic?
Idiosyncratic risk is, so in the finance literature, a firm has two risks. One is a market risk. A market risk can happen, something that can affect all the firms. Say, for example, interest rates drops, interest rates goes up, foreign exchange.
For example, recent crisis.
Yeah, for example, recent crisis is a market risk, is an example of a market risk.
Yeah.
All the firms get affected, one way or another. But the idiosyncratic risk is your firm-specific risk, meaning you have a control over that. You can control that idiosyncratic risk. You cannot control the market risk, unless, of course, if you are in China and have a very cozy relationship with the government, yes, you can. But, you know, so the idiosyncratic risk is something that's a firm-specific risk, and firms apparently form mergers and acquisitions and joint ventures to reduce their idiosyncratic risk. Well, so what happens if the firms reduce the idiosyncratic risk? As our counsel just told us, the implication of this is when the firms have less idiosyncratic risk, another body of literature associates that with the market power. The firms that have higher market power tend to have less idiosyncratic risk, meaning the policy implication of this research is the government should watch closely these joint ventures and mergers and acquisitions because they kill the competition, because they increase the market power, so they reduce their own idiosyncratic risk and they can pass that idiosyncratic risk as a price to their customers, whether they are in the service sector or in the retail sector, doesn't matter. So that's the research that I have done. And of course, there are a lot of work to do, and I'm working on them. Right now, I'm not a academician in the true sense because I work in the industry. I started working in the industry in Bank of New York Mellon. I want to briefly tell you what I do over there. My role in Bank of New York Mellon is come up with models. I create models that assess the bank's market risk and the economic risk. Market risk is I deal with foreign exchange, modeling the interest rates, foreign exchange rates, and so on and so forth. And in the credit risk, I model the probabilities of somebody borrowing and not being able to return the money to the bank. So I usually deal with the models, or the models that I create tend to rate other banks, other corporates, and mutual funds. So that's briefly what I do. I use all the statistical techniques and finance, and I come up with a model that assess the bank's position in various conditions. For example, the Bank of New York Mellon has a lot of business in South America, Middle East, and they have a lot of exposure in foreign exchange. So say what happens if the inflation goes wrong with the assumption of the bank. Well, inflation affects the foreign exchange, or interest rate affects the foreign exchange. So I put this in the model, I calculate, I create various scenarios, and come up with some confidence limit and report my results to the higher decision makers, saying, with this confidence level, I think we will not lose money, or with this confidence level, we can make some profit. That's what I do right now. So, well, thank you for listening. Sorunuz var mı deyip soramadım. Sorunuz var mı? Theoretical, practical aspects.
Maybe a theoretical aspect?
Sure.
So you mentioned that when the government has more power, in this idiosyncratic risk goes kind of down?
No, I give an example of if you have a relation, say for example, some countries where the government quasi-owns the country, quasi-owns the company. then the market risk will not affect you because let's go back to 2008 crisis.
That's my question. Actually, that's where I'm going to relate to
Yeah.
how that affects your research, what happened in 2008, basically.
Yeah, for example, GM, General Motors. General Motors should have been bankrupted actually, but the government saved it. So that's the example of a market risk. If you have a government relation, then market risk will not really affect you because the governments always have a deepest pocket. They can reach their pocket and can save you. You see what I mean? So as far as the finance theory goes on, if the government is backing you, there is no theory about it.
Yeah.
They are just saving you.
So do you think market regulates the finance itself? I mean, the bankers can regulate themselves? Because I do remember several years ago, former federal chief of the United States said that we don't need to do anything to influence economy because market regulated itself. And right after this 2005 crisis.
Yeah, sure. You know, it's very interesting when you talk to these politicians or the pro market guys, so speaking. They say, okay, market can take care of itself. It can regulate itself, and so on and so forth. But as soon as crisis comes, things go south, they start crying. Where's the government to save us? So I don't agree with the market regulating itself. You know, you always need to have policies and procedures that should, you know, either stop them from doing certain things or at least direct them to the right direction. The other thing is, this is a piece of inside information. I think you will be amazed to find. About a month ago, we had an award ceremony for the achievements, and I got one of them for the last year's high achievement, and we were talking to the chief risk officer of the Bank of New York Mellon. He sits in, this guy is a pretty important guy. He sits in New York, and he told us, you know, it was a very casual dinner, drinks were around, and you know, he was talking very casually. It slipped out of his mouth, I think. He told us that they get briefing from CIA every month about the countries where, you know, political stability, interest rates, and all. I was very amazed. I was like, hold on, did you mention that you
my
get...
question, how you make your model without not having those information while you come up with the good information?
Yeah, sure. You know, you just, as far as the model is concerned, you take all the publicly available data, i.e. meaning, you know, whatever you have. But believe me, the models usually in this framework explains at most 60% of the phenomenon. The other 40% goes unexplained. And you fill the blank. You fill the blank.
One more.
Sure.
As long as it goes model, most of the time it comes out wrong. Sometimes.
Yeah.
So what's the success rate of the model?
You know, to undermine the work of economists, they say economists are good about telling the past story, saying they are good at explaining why something didn't happen.
Yeah.
In terms of, instead of telling why, you know, what will happen in the future. Well, I certain degree I agree with that, but what can I do with my model? What can I do with my model if Obama administration is stepping in and saving, say, ABC Bank?
Yeah.
I mean, to my model, this bank should go out of business, but it's not going out of business. Why?
So in that relation, do you think the bailing out of these private sectors by government is a good thing? What do you think?
You know, I think it's an interesting thing. In 2008, they didn't save Lehman Brothers. It just went down. But when they felt like, you know, it may have a domino effect, then they stepped in and said, okay, wait a second, we are saving it. But it's for us, for ordinary people, there is always cost associated with our actions. When we make a mistake, we pay for it. But when the big corporations make a mistake, they don't pay for it. Do I agree?
In the long run for a country, I mean, especially a country like this one, like Citibank, for example.
Citibank.
Big mistake.
Yes.
And it bailed out, and they're back to whatever they were doing before. So.
Yes. That's why, you know, that's why you should be, countries like Turkmenistan have to be very careful about pegging their currency to dollar or keeping it floating rate versus fixed rate. They should be very careful about it because, see, you are dealing with somebody who operates like a black box 40% of the time. You know, if you think that, you know, it's a demand and supply equilibrium, market equilibrium, and if you start acting very naive, you get hurt pretty bad, pretty soon.
Your graduation?
I got my Ph.D. From Texas Tech University.
Texas A&M?
Texas Tech.
Texas,
Yes, Texas Tech University.
Texas State.
Texas Tech.
Very good.
There was another hand trying. Yes.
You mentioned that your research can only be accurate only 60% of the time, usually.
The models.
Yes, the models.
Yes.
And social science research in general, as a whole, is a very, as you know, very controversial area. And my question to you is, we know that social events are affected by various things and it's extremely unpredictable.
Yes.
So, how much relevance does it leave in then for the social science research? I mean, the crisis, or the previous crisis being an example, it wasn't predicted at all. So things like that happen 40% of the time, on average, let's say.
Sure. I know where the question is going. You know, you always need an anchor. Think of like that. And whether it's precise anchor or whether it's less precise anchor, you need an anchor, and based on that, you incorporate your subjective feelings, or there are soft information. You can incorporate your soft information, but you need to have a concrete evidence to make a decision, right? Whether it's very precise or whether it's not less precise. As a model developer, for example, we do that in banking all the time. Up to a certain point, we make a model, but after a certain point, we start saying, for example, the commercial real estate is an excellent example. I make models in commercial real estate where I calculate the probability of that borrower being defaulted, meaning going bad. But one of the factors that we take in, which model cannot incorporate, is location. Right? That's very subjective, but location matters in real estate. Or, the other thing, the subjective thing that you can put into model is who is behind this project. Say, multimillionaire guy who cares about his reputation is behind this project, then you rate that good. But are you doing that with a model? No. You're building a model up to a certain point, but beyond that point, you're incorporating your own subjective feelings about it. So, but you always need some sort of quantitative analysis to anchor your analysis, anchor your decision. And stepping on that, then based on your anchor, you either go left or right, and you make it like that. You make your decision based on that. Otherwise, it's just, okay. You can't do that. Thank you for your time.